What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to basketball. And more importantly, welcome back to our season preview series, the series where we're going to break down every single NBA team before the start of the regular season. In these videos, we go really in depth. We're going to talk about rotation, salary cap, what do their draft assets look like, what does the depth chart look like, what does their offseason look like, trade scenarios, everything that you need to be ready for the start of the regular season. In this video, we have the infamous Washington Wizards, and there's a lot to talk about with this team, so make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment. I've responded to every single comment on my YouTube channel up to this point, and I intend to keep on doing so. All right. Let's get into it. Alrighty, y'all, as you can see, there is a lot to go through as always. By the way, this is my preseason preview spreadsheet. For those of you that don't know, I like to build these spreadsheets just to kind of be like, hey, this is what's going on in the video, help visualize and articulate everything. If you want access to the spreadsheet, it's really simple. All you have to do is leave me a comment below saying, hey, I would like access to the spreadsheet. I actually just responded to a comment like that 2 minutes ago. I'll then drop you a link to my Discord. You can then join the Discord and shoot me another DM there, just being like, hey, I was the guy from the comments, can I have the spreadsheet? I'll give it to you right there. I really like giving these things out to people. Then you guys can share what you make in the community, in the Discord. I think it's a really fun activity. But anyway, the Washington Wizards. We've talked about the Washington Wizards quite a bit on this channel. They're infamously one of the two, probably, how should I put this, the least favorable franchises in the NBA, at least if you were to ask the players, right? What are the two franchises that are looked down upon probably more than any of them? It's Washington and Charlotte, unfortunately. That's nothing against anybody that likes those teams or whatever. It's just that's how it tends to be. Those two teams are often very mismanaged. They tend not to win too many games. Players tend to not be happy, and they don't tend to develop there very often. There's just something to be said about ownership and leadership that just can't quite get it done, and Washington has kind of found themselves in another cycle of this. Obviously, in recent memory, you had the John Wall, Bradley Beal duo and everything. They made a little bit of noise. The team never really found a way to put any more talent around them, and they've kind of been in a lull ever since. The list first season was the first year that they didn't have Bradley Beal in a long time. They went and added guys like Jordan Poole to the team. That was a complete disaster. They went through a coaching change in the middle of the season. Jordan Poole and Kuzma looked like they were kind of just doing whatever the hell they wanted out there. Team cohesiveness was poor. There wasn't a lot of development going on, and I'm trying really hard not to just crap on this team and everything, but it was a really bad season in terms of just me watching it from a coach's point of view. And I've got pretty good connections within this organization, and I can just tell you I don't hear very good things very often. And we hope that's going to change, right? I actively want all NBA teams to be run well. It's better for the league, right? I want to see competitiveness out of them. I want to see everybody making strategic moves, but this team found itself in a poor spot last year. They were 15-67, just barely better than the Detroit Pistons, who had a historically horrible season. So it was a rough year last year, all said and done. They ended up with the second overall pick in this year's draft. They ended up taking Alex Sarr with that one. They actually had two other first-round picks that they used this year, given it was a little bit lower quality of a draft. But I've categorized this team as rebuilding. I don't think there's a whole lot of tearing down that really needs to be done on this team. Everybody that's on this team is somewhat here for a purpose, or we're trying to see if they're going to become something. So this team's more so in the phase of hey, are we who's going to stay with us long term? Can you be a guy for us? Can you be a guy for us? And trying to have some vets on the team. If you guys were curious, these are the other four categorizations of things. They're selling, growing, and contending. This team's rebuilding. This team's trying to figure out where it belongs in the league, trying to figure out what players are good and which ones aren't right now. And they've got a long way to go, all said and done, because I think we all think of the Washington Wizards and we don't necessarily think oh, that guy's going to be a stud in the NBA, right? They got this guy could be a stud one day. They don't really have that. They've got some quality basketball players, but it's turning into, as you guys can see, no wins whatsoever, and it looks completely disjointed out there on the court. I mean, it doesn't take a trained eye, maybe such as myself. I feel bad patting myself on the back for that. I say that because I am a professional and this is what I've done before, but it doesn't take a trained eye to watch this team last year and know that it was just a train wreck all the way around. It just wasn't good. Nobody was really developing. Well, one person got a little bit better and now they're gone, and we'll talk about that. But This team's got a long way to go, so let's talk about some of the goals and everything. And the first one is just clean up the organization, man. I'm sick of hearing, like, this guy's unhappy and this guy's unhappy on the inside, and, like, players are unhappy with, like, the coaching. And so we just need to clean up this organization, and hopefully they're working on that and everything right now. We really hope that, shout out Hornets fans, you guys have had an interesting offseason where, like, new ownership group and everything. So far so good. Like, we all suspiciously kind of squint at that team and we're going, haven't seen the Wizards do something yet to make me think, like, okay, like, something good's gonna happen. If anything, the offseason raised more eyebrows, but let's see if we can clean it up a little bit. Second goal, build some draft capital. Can we go through and add a little more capital to this team? Because we're missing that star player, right? We don't have a young budding player on this team, so that means we have to still try and find him. We have to draft him. Next year is a very big draft. This could be the time to try to pick up some more assets and stuff. And by the way, I'm talking about these goals because as we go throughout the rest of the video, I want you guys to keep this stuff in mind. And then grow someone, and I put in parentheses here, please. Like, somebody needs to develop in this organization. Somebody needs to, right? Like, they've got a couple young guys in this team. Man, do I hope some of them can figure it out, man, because there's just not enough success stories coming out of this franchise, man. Y'all have to grow someone. You have to grow somebody. So let's talk about their offseason. It was an interesting one, and then we'll get into talking about, like, the current roster, some trade ideas, everything like that. Alrighty, so we have an interesting offseason to look at here. I've got it broken down into a couple different categories for those of you that aren't too familiar with this series or anything. Go back and watch the previous videos. You should. I think it's interesting to go through each and every team. So we've got drafted players, first of all. You guys are smart enough to know what that means. Player departures, players that were on the full roster last year that are no longer on the roster. And then players brought in, players that were, like, in the NBA last year that weren't on the roster that are now on the roster for the start of this regular season. So you're going to look around and see that there's been quite a shakeup here. We have a couple drafted players here. We have some players brought in, and we got some players leaving, right? So quite the shakeup here. And this team went through, like, a big phase of having a lot of different, like, two-way players on it last year. So that's why the numbers, maybe if you're adding up, like, okay, 4 guys are gone, like 6 added, like, what kind of happened? This team was just flowing through people last year. There was a lot of trades happening. There was a lot of new guys joining the teams at all different times. So I'm just going by end of the season roster, like, stuff like that. So that's how I'm basing this off of. Let's start off with the draft. The Wizards got probably the guy that they wanted most of all, and a guy that between him and Risache, Alex Sarr and Risache, pretty similar players. I had Alex Sarr #1 on my, like, official draft board that I handed into, like, an NBA team this year, just saying, like, look, if I had to pick one or the other, I'm taking Sarr for the sole fact that it's harder to find 7-foot dudes that can, like, it just be an NBA center, right? It's just a harder commodity to find, and this team needed somebody at every single position, so I like Sarr a little bit more for that reason. Sarr said that he wanted to go to Washington, and that he did. What have we seen out of Alex Sarr? I want to preface by saying the star potential, I didn't recognize any coming out of this draft. That doesn't mean that there won't be one. Statistics tell us that every single draft class has an all-star in some capacity, right? Like, somebody will become one. Alex Sarr is a really interesting prospect. When you look at him move, dude can move like a guard. Like, I'm not saying he can handle like a guard. He moves and runs like a guard. He's stupid athletic for his size. That's awesome. His defensive instincts are off the charts already, right? Like, I've seen him switch on to point guards, and then as the ball's swinging around, him drop all the way back down to protect the paint with some crazy blocks, with some crazy athleticism. His shot creating skills are pretty low right now, and like I said, a little bit of a weaker draft class for a guy that's supposed to be like the #1 pick and everything. The offensive game is just, it is what it is right now. He's not really creating for himself. He can get out and run in transition, and that's cool, but otherwise I wouldn't expect much outside of like a lob threat and a guy that is just getting some offensive rebounds and putting it back up this year. I know he had his whole thing in like the summer league, and I'll always say the summer league has no indication, like there's no correlation we've observed, I can't talk today, statistically, that says like this is going to correlate to the NBA. There's nothing that says that. So Alex Sarr had a pretty rough summer league or whatever. He didn't shoot the ball very well. He didn't have anybody really creating for him necessarily, making it easier. The summer league's chaotic and everything. It's just what it is. So I'm not reading into that too much. The defense looked pretty good, and that's what I care about, right? Like that's what we should see out of him this year, is a guy that can play some elite defense for them, be a rim protector, hopefully be their center of the future, because I do think he's like, at least when I evaluated him, I'm like, yeah, this guy should be a starting center in the NBA. I could truly see that. So hopefully he can grow into that. Carlton Carrington, aka Bub Carrington, a point guard coming in. They addressed a different position here. They ended up making a trade to go get this pick. Bub Carrington's a really interesting player, a little bit lengthier of a point guard, has pretty good vision for the most part. There's a lot of times where I see him go like, oh, that's a really good pass, and there's other times where I'm like, okay, he missed that one completely. But young point guard, it's the hardest thing to do coming into the NBA, right, is being a point guard. There's just a lot to do. He gets his shots up. I told you I can't talk today. He gets his shots up very quickly, which is kind of a good thing early on, as long as you can be a good decision maker with it. He's usually pretty good at getting to his spots in the mid-range and being pretty lethal from there. We have some like 3-point questions out of him. I feel like there's so many like guards nowadays that just don't come in ready to shoot, and I blame AAU for that. And that can be another video or whatever. So do I think like Bub Carrington's a day one starter? No, I don't think that, and that's honestly the expectation with a lot of people in this draft, so that's no like knock on him or anything. I think he could develop into something nicely, and I hope all these guys do. I think Bub Carrington's going to be a nice like bench backup player for them this year. Let Malcolm Brogdon kind of run the show this season, but see where he can go. Can he be a creator for the rest of the team and become like a lengthier guard switching defensive type player? I think that could be really interesting. And then we get into Keyshawn George here. So they addressed every single position in the first round, getting a lengthier wing here out of Miami. George was very ball dominant in his time in Miami, and that's kind of interesting. You watch some of his moves, and they're really not like that crisp. He kind of does a lot of those moves where you don't actually go anywhere. They just kind of look cool, but he was converting from three often enough, and he should prove to be a lengthier, like athletic wing defender that could be a 3-and-D guy, maybe a secondary ball handler at some point down the line, since he did so much of it in college. I'd say it's probably going to take a year or two before I feel comfortable assuming that he can do that, just based off the progressions that I've seen in my career with player development and stuff. But Keyshawn George, I think he's an interesting pick. I think they did well in the draft. I don't know if this is the draft you wanted to have 3 people in, but this team needed some young talent, and they went out and found some, so hopefully they can start to develop these guys. But let's talk about who they lost along the way. So remember when I was talking about earlier in the video that somebody developed last year and now they're no longer here? Well, that was the boy Denny here. Denny was a former lottery pick of the Wizards, like 3 years ago, 4 years ago? I think it was 4 years ago now. And, you didn't see like a crazy ton out of him, but you always knew like the hope was that he'd become kind of like a point forward that could pass the ball a little bit, rebound a little bit, be a shot creator for himself. And this last year, he started to really figure it out. He was like one of the only bright spot on this team last year, unless you want to count like Koulibaly looking like competent as a rookie and looking smart. That's how I'd probably describe his rookie season. But Denny showed a lot of flashes of being that primary ball handler, going and getting buckets, stuff like that. Let's take a look at like some of his numbers quick. So Denny got himself up to like 14, 15 points a game. He was shooting 37% from 3 on 3 attempts a game. You're getting 6 rebounds out of him and almost 4 assists. The turnovers were still a little bit high, but this team was just kind of crazy all in general, so I'm not tripping about it. And then what did they do? They went and traded him. They finally developed a young guy and they traded him. He was already signed to an extension on a contract that was decreasing in price every single year, and they traded him. And what did they get for him? They got Malcolm Brogdon and what turned out to be Bub Carrington. So like they got a starting point guard for the next year as a veteran. That's important for young guys or whatever. And they got a different young point guard or whatever. But like, why Washington? I know it's like a new group and everything that's kind of running the show now, and they're like, oh well, we didn't draft Denny or whatever. But like, this is one of the few examples of a guy that was starting to figure it out in your organization. You traded him, and I don't know why it makes me so mad. I'm like, oh, this team had it, and I just don't think they got enough for him either. He's one of the better valued contracts out there. Like, Portland didn't even need this guy. I feel like they were just like, well, we'd rather just have Denny than like Brogdon in the like 14th pick or whatever Bub Carrington was this year. They're like, yeah, no, we used the draft pick to find a good young player that can get a second contract. Denny's already that guy, so yeah, no, we'll just take him and figure out the weird like depth chart thing afterwards. So kind of annoyed by that one. That's just my opinion. You guys let me know what you think of the Denny trade and everything. I think it's bogus that they did that. Tyus Jones is gone. We've all known Tyus Jones to be just one of the better, just like team operators, kind of leaders in the NBA, the assist to turnover ratio god and everything, both him and his brother Trey, very, very good at running a show, right? They're just going to play smart basketball, play good defense, not going to score a ton of points, but you at least saw like some of the efficiency numbers perk up this last year for like Tyus, right? Like we're seeing 40% from 3 on 4 attempts. That's awesome, right? Like we'll take that all the time. And you see the 7 assists, the turnovers only at 1. That's awesome, right? And he ended up leaving to go to Phoenix because with the way that the offseason set up now, mid-level contracts are a lot harder to get because teams are afraid of the apron. So Tyus Jones went and bet on himself, went and joined a team that needed a starting point guard for a little bit of money, and he's going to try to get really paid next offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if he does. I'd say this team would miss him, but they got Brogdon, and that's a fine replacement, so I'm not tripping about that one too much. Landry Shamit's gone. That one we expected that he just wouldn't stick around. They just didn't guarantee his contract. Basically just catch and shoot guy. Very, very deadly from 3. A little bit undersized for the guard spot that he plays at 2, but not the biggest deal loss at the end of the day. And then they lost the boy Eugene here, who in all transparency just did not contribute a whole bunch. Sorry, that's just the best way to put it, but he's no longer on the squad. Who did they pick up, though? They brought in a couple interesting names. So they brought in Jonas Valanciunas, who, let's be honest, Valanciunas came here for one particular reason. They were one of the few teams that could pay him this year, right? He wanted one last payday. Nobody else was going to do it. He comes in, he gets a nice payday. He gets to be a veteran center on the team, which is cool. Like I've always said, you want veterans on these teams you're trying to grow, right? You need guys like that. That's a perfect guy to mentor Alex Sarr. That's awesome. That's what you want on the team. I hope that Valanciunas can be that good mentor for them. I wouldn't be surprised if he gets traded at some point in the season or gets like, he's not going to get bought out. That doesn't make much sense. But I wouldn't be surprised if somebody moves him because they're willing to pay a pretty penny to go get him at this point. But it's you got Valanciunas at the end of the day, so that's nice. Another vet you added was Brogdon. We talked about him with the Denny and Bub Carrington trade and everything. Brogdon's going to be a solid starting point guard for them, right? We all know how stable he is, that he can do a little bit of everything, just an extremely above average NBA basketball player. And so he said he was cool chilling in Portland. They ended up getting Denny, and they seem happy about that, so that's great. But at least now Washington has a stable presence at point guard that can also get them a couple more buckets. Like, I don't really care that they're losing the assist to turnover of Tyus Jones because like the rest of the team is just in such disarray anyway. I think the leadership that you're going to get from Brogdon is probably more valuable, at least for this year. I don't foresee them moving him because I don't think they're ready to hand the keys over to Bub Carrington, but is what it is. And then the Wizards went and took a flyer on Saddiq Bey. For those of you that don't know, Saddiq Bey's been in the league for a couple years now. Supposed to be a 3-and-D wing. The defensive numbers have suggested that he's been okay at points. He was not good defensively last season, but in all fairness to him, every single person on the Hawks had like a horrible defensive rating last year. And defensive rating is not just what you guys think it is, where it's just like a plus minus. Essentially, it's much more complicated than that, and they make it actually individualized to an NBA player. But Saddiq Bey had an interesting season last year. He's shown that he can be somewhat capable from the outside and be an okay scorer, but then he went and like tore his ACL or whatever, so he didn't get a big contract necessarily or anything, but the Wizards gave him an okay contract. I don't know who they were necessarily bidding against with this, but you get a young guy that you can take a chance on to throw it at the wing, so I'm not mad at it by any means. I mean, if he ends up working out and turning into a player that I've always thought he could be, then that's great. I'm not saying like all-star potential, but I think he can be like a borderline starter player in the NBA at points. So we'll see what they get. I don't think it's a bad gamble at all. I think they maybe gave him a bit too much money, but that just is what it is at the end of the day. So weird offseason. You lost out on Tyus Jones. You should just traded him while you could have. Denny, I don't know why you traded him. I think you did fine in the draft. It's just maybe not the draft you wanted to use all those assets on. And then you brought in some vets. So weird offseason. The Denny thing really hurts me. So you could have just kept Denny and not had Brogdon or Bub Carrington. Then you might have had a point guard issue. But like, I don't know, man. I would have liked to have kept Denny if I was a Wizards front office person, but that's just me. Let's go take a look at the rest of the roster now and see how it compares. Alrighty, y'all. Y'all know this is my favorite thing on the whole spreadsheet. This is basically my ideal offseason spreadsheet right here. This page does a lot of different things for us. We can take a look at player salaries, how many years they got left and everything, the actual like team salary cap situation, depth charts, and draft picks and assets. This gives us a good sense as to what the team's going into the season with, what kind of assets do they have to work with, where can we make some improvements and stuff. And so where I always like to start off with this is the draft picks. And remember, we talked about this being one of the goals to start the season, is we wanted to try to make this whole like draft pick situation just a little bit better. So this is what they're working with right now. And I'll note that some picks not shown have protections. Like, they're most likely going to get their pick back this year. Unless something crazy happens, they're probably going to get their 2025 first round pick back, which is good because this is a good draft class and they very well could be a bad team this year, right? And you'd want to get a top draft pick because we're still looking to try to find that star, right? Where we haven't seen that yet. Looking at the assets they have, though, it's not that impressive considering the situation that they're in and knowing what we know about this team, because they've just traded Bradley Beal not too long ago, right? Franchise type player. Just traded Bradley Beal. They also just traded Denny, who you're like, okay, yeah, you ended up getting players in a draft pick that you already used for him. But considering the assets that you've recently moved off of, your draft situation isn't great. And what do I mean by that? There's a lot of second round picks. Like, great. You look at the first round pick situation, it's mostly just their own, right? Like it is just their own. They have one like Trailblazers unprotected pick here, and they've got like a Warriors that pick that's heavily protected. They most likely don't get that. They can swap some of their picks with Phoenix, which let's be honest, that's just going to mean nothing because Phoenix is most likely going to be better than them. But it's not a great situation. You can turn these second round picks into like a role player or something if you need to, but these are more valuable when you're like a contending team. Otherwise, like, teams are going to say this in their negotiations, right? Like, let's say you want to offer them like these second round picks. They're going to be like, well, yeah, we know you don't want 2026 second round picks like for this season. It just doesn't make sense for you to do that. You're not going to fill your roster up with these guys a lot. Like, you're going to send 3 of those guys overseas, right? That's just how it's going to work. So you got to give us more than that. It's kind of a negative asset in a way at the same time. So you have to be strategic about how you use these. But what can we do on this team to try to improve the draft situation? Are there players on this team that we should be moving? Should we be blowing up this team a little bit more? There's probably a strong argument to do so. So that's something we'll explore in this video, whether or not we can improve the draft stock situation, get some other guys a little more burn on the team, and kind of go from there. But let's talk about the salary cap situation. Alrighty, so here's the 4 levels of the salary cap. For those of you that don't know how the NBA works, there's basically 4 lines that you have to be aware of when calculating salary. If you want a full breakdown of these, go watch like the first video or 2 of this series. It's the Celtics and Grizzlies videos. I go into much more detail. In essence, there's the cap line itself. Once that one hits 0, you're over the cap, right? There's certain rules that apply to you, like you just can't sign players for more than like a minimum after this point. Once you cross the luxury tax line, meaning when this number that's currently 16 million hits 0, you're going to have to pay a lot more for your team to exist. And then we get into the fun ones, the first and second apron. These are 2 newer things into the NBA that they've added to try to combat players getting traded and moved all the time. All these star players always demanding things. The NBA they want players to stay where they're at. They want cohesiveness. They want players to be with the same teams for a longer time. It's better for the league. They see better retention and like fan base numbers, right? It's better advertising for them. It makes the league look better. So they've put in these aprons to basically say, hey, teams, when you get too expensive, meaning you become a really good basketball team, right, more often than not, we're going to lock you down and we're going to make it really hard for you to make any moves. Basically saying you're going to be stuck with the team that you're on, and we're going to penalize you even more for doing so and getting to this point. So you better be damn sure you got a team that's locked in. It's like the Boston Celtics, they've hit 0 on this second apron, and they're far past it, right? Because they're like, no, we got our group. We're good. We don't need to move any of these guys. We're fine. We don't need to play in the buyout market. We don't need to be like packaging guys to go get a star player. We don't need it, right? So if you're not a contending team, you want to avoid those. And that's what the Washington Wizards are doing right now, right? They've run out of cap space, but they haven't even hit the luxury tax yet. That's probably pretty good for them, and they're far away from the first and second apron. So what does that mean? This team could be used as like a trade hub at points this season, a place that can help like facilitate 3-team trades or something like that, because those are going to have to become more common with having these aprons in place now. Teams are going to need places to send other salaries and other players or whatever, so the Wizards can basically say, hey, we can take on some of this salary for this season. That's cool by us. Give us some draft picks or something like that, right? Let's bolster ourselves. Let's boost ourselves. Maybe a young player or something like that. Y'all send us that. We'll pay for your bad player. Something like that, right? So that's kind of how I'd view their salary cap situation. They're in the spot they want to be at, considering the level and talent level that they have on the team right now. They can still improve it. They can still work out a little bit more salary off of this team, but it's not really that bad, and we'll start to talk about it here. All right, that means we got to start talking about Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma. So Jordan Poole coming over from the Warriors last year, I truly thought, and this is me overseeing a couple different things. I thought Jordan Poole was going to lead the league in scoring last year. I really did. I'm like, oh man, he's on this Wizards team. He can get up as many shots as he wants. Great. He's just going to go get to do his thing. And unfortunately, he did do his thing. And man, it didn't make any sense. Like last year, he was playing pretty crazy. It was pretty all over the place, especially at the start of the year. A lot of shot chucking, a lot of no offense existing. Like it was nuts. Like some of the playmaking skills seemed to regress a little bit. A lot of bad shot attempts were had. He clearly was not vibing with like the coaching staff and everything. Now, end of the season, there were some improvements. All of a sudden, he was playing a little bit of point guard, and things were going a little bit better for them. But Jordan Poole's not going to get traded. Like nobody's taking on $30 million of Jordan Poole unless you literally pay them to do so. So Jordan Poole's on the team. Let's hope that they can have a better refined season where he can become like that leading scorer figure for them. We got Kyle Kuzma, who similar season, just played a little bit hectic. We'll say a little bit more efficient. I mean, we can take a look at Kyle Kuzma's numbers. 22 points a game. That's awesome. 6 rebounds, 4 assists. Turnovers are high again. Bad team, so they're going to be inflated a little bit. Efficiency, like I said, it's better than Poole's. It's not great still. He's a little bit better around the rim. Let's bring up his actual shooting chart though, just to see. Yeah, this should tell you everything right here. Look at how scattered this is. So Kuzma did get around the rim pretty good. Kyle Kuzma's a really, really good off-ball player. And that's why I think he'd be so valuable on another team. If you got him on a team that made some sense and had some structure and logic, I think he'd be a really valuable player because there's not many guys that understand like where to flow on a basketball court when they don't have the basketball. And Kyle Kuzma's one of those guys that gets it. A lot of these are not even him like creating it himself, like with the basketball. It's him doing it without the basketball. So Kyle Kuzma, great around the rim. That's awesome. But otherwise, like he's just chucking. I'm willing to bet that like Jordan Poole's looks pretty similar. Holy shit, yeah. No, it's interesting. I'm not surprised he's hot from right here. This is Jordan Poole's sweet spot right here, right? But otherwise, it's cold, it's not good, it's scattered. We'd want it to be a little bit tighter to this line, right? This just tells you between when your best two players got all these shots coming from like all the way out here, you guys weren't running a good offense. It didn't make sense. They were just basically standing around waiting for things to happen. They had all these other scattered shots everywhere. It wasn't efficient. It was all over the place. So you got to try and get more out of them. Kyle Kuzma's a contract that you can trade. His contract's at a good salary. He gets good production. You could see how he could fit in with other players right now. So I wouldn't be surprised. And I know Kuzma said he wants to stay on the Wizards, maybe because they let him do whatever the hell he wants. But I personally would try to move Kyle Kuzma this year. I think you could get a pretty penny for him, get some draft picks, something like that, but it's always hard to try to execute how those trades are going to look. Then we got Malcolm Brogdon. He's only on the team for a year, and then you've got an improved salary cap situation even more. Even if he's just a rental this year, we all know what he can bring. That's awesome. Rashawn Holmes is still on the team for this season. I believe his contract is not guaranteed after this one, so you don't have to have 2 more years. So like you could also have Rashawn Holmes off the books after this year. He's just going to be a reserve big for you. Run, jump, and dunk. Defensive numbers not that great at this point, but reserve big in case you want to move some of the other guys at some point on the team. Marvin Bagley, 1 year left on the rookie deal, if you all can believe it. It's been that long since they didn't take Luka or Trae Young with that pick. That one's going to hurt for forever, Sacramento Kings fans. I am sorry about that one. But we've seen interesting offensive spurts out of Marvin Bagley. Like even in Washington, he had some decent outputs for them. Can we get just like some Marvin Bagley numbers here? So yeah, 24 games here, 13 points a game. We got 47% from 3 on not even 1 attempt a game, but he was clicking on some of them. He got actually like 8 rebounds a game. So you've got a competent basketball player here, but the defensive numbers just keep going down and down and down for Marvin Bagley. And so extensions and like giving him more money in a contract after this, I guess that's something you can evaluate this year and kind of look and see like, okay, did he become something? Because we got Sarr. Sarr should be a better version of Marvin Bagley anyway, so I guess it'll be something to see. Maybe they can dangle him to someone because I could see him being a valuable backup center to somebody. It's a little bit much money for a backup center right now with how the trade rules work out, but I don't know. It's something, right? We got Alex Sarr obviously on his rookie contract. We talked about Valanciunas. If we can talk about another Frenchman here, the other Frenchman being Alex Sarr, let's talk about Bilal Coulibaly, who had a really good run in the Olympics this last year. Coulibaly was a dim bright spot is how I want to put it, mostly just because I feel like he went very under the radar. When I watched Koulibaly in his rookie season with Washington last year, I noticed somebody that was learning the game very quickly. Like, I was watching him like early in the season because I just hadn't seen a ton of film on him. I'm watching him, I'm like, okay, yep, I'm seeing these mistakes, and that's very common, right? Very, very common for rookies. I've been a freshman before. I totally get it. It takes a little bit. And then like a month later, I'm like, oh, no, he figured it out. Okay, yeah, now he knows how to attack these closeouts, and he knows how to get to the rim this way or whatever, and he's making the right pass after this. I'm like, okay, we got a smart basketball player. This guy's learning something. The defense was what we expected. The defense looked pretty good last year. If we can take a look at just like some of the efficiency numbers in itself, I mean, you got 8 points a game out of him. You got 35% from three on about 3 attempts a game. Yeah, that's a hell of a rookie season right there for the young fella. Lengthy, potential 3-and-D defender. I don't know if we're going to get much else out of him, but I like the potential. I like that he could maybe be a starting wing for you at some point, so let's continue to grow and foster that. Shout out Koulibaly. Talked about Sadiq Bey a little bit. Johnny Davis. Oh boy, Johnny Davis. Johnny Davis has always taken a while to like develop wherever he's going, but this is one of those where I feel like the Wizards kind of ruined a talent here, and it wouldn't be the first time that's happened. But Johnny Davis has been... I never want to just like shit talk players, right? I never, ever, ever want to do that on the internet. And I think you guys should always watch yourselves too on the internet by just saying like, this guy's bad or something like this. Like there's just a real person on the other end of this that's working really hard and trying to do something. And there's so many other factors that go into like being a talented NBA player. I think you guys forget they're not just playing basketball at the end of the day. There's just so much life and business that goes into this. These guys are so busy all the time, and we ask so much out of them. But Johnny Davis has had a pretty rough start to his career. Hasn't looked that great. I'm frankly surprised they picked up the option on him, but I'm glad they're giving him a chance. Maybe he can get on the court this year and turn into something. We hope that he can be a good defensive player. Didn't look good last year defensively, but again, a lot of this team didn't. But maybe with a little bit refined roster, a couple more vets on the team, maybe you start to see something. We've seen little spurts out of him where he's getting like 10, 11 points or something like that. It's mostly getting to the hoop. The shot hasn't really found itself yet, and the handle isn't tight yet, but a while to go still. He's still young. We'll give him some time. We talked about Bub and Keyshawn George. Patrick Baldwin Jr., let me just group these last 3 guys kind of together. I don't understand like why these 3 guys are still on the team. Patrick Baldwin Jr., was he a first round pick by the Warriors? Like some years ago, I can't even remember. But Patrick Baldwin Jr., we just haven't seen many minutes of him. He's supposed to be kind of like a stretch 4 or something like that. Haven't seen him on the court much. Anthony Gill, like, I don't know. He's not efficient. He doesn't play defense, and he doesn't get a lot of burn. I don't know why he's on the team still. I don't quite understand what... I just feel like there's got to be another veteran we can just bring on the team or something like that, right? And then we got Jared Butler, reserve point guard that, again, also doesn't play very good defense. He's not very efficient on offense. I'm not quite sure why they're still on the team. I get they're cheap or whatever, but like these 3 roster spots just feel like they could have been utilized better, so I'm a little bit confused with them. I wish I could give you more analysis on these guys, but they don't appear on the court, and they're not productive when they are. So... Again, I don't want to call players bad or anything. I just don't. And I know I'm somewhat insinuating that they are just by giving this explanation. I'm trying to teach you guys how to speak properly and like well-behaved people. But like, I don't know. If I'm running the team, I just don't need these guys on the team, right? I don't think there's a ton of potential here that we're trying to find with these guys. Maybe they're great locker room presences, and that's awesome, right? But like, I don't know. I feel like I could go find a veteran that could at least do that and be a better mentor or something like that. So I don't know. That's just me, but that's the current outlook on this team. Let's go into the depth chart now. So at the point guard spot, you got Brogdon and Carrington. You feel pretty solid about that. If those are your 2 guys for this year, I'd like to think that they can keep it that way. They've got a bunch of other guys that could be ball handlers on this team. Like, in all honesty, I should probably put Jared Butler here. So let's just move him over because he plays mostly point guard. At least when I look on Synergy, that's what they have him categorized as. At the shooting guard, you got Jordan Poole, who can play some point guard if needed. You got Keyshawn George, who can be a ball handler as well if needed, and you'll probably try to see if there is anything there this year. But Jordan Poole, Johnny Davis, right? Let's hope we can get a better season out of Poole. Johnny Davis, let's see if we can get anything out of him. Koulibaly, I think, deserves a start this year. I think that's clear. A couple of Frenchmen playing together. I think that's really cool. A little bit of young development for the team. You got George waiting in the wings, literally. That's awesome. then you've got a lot of forwards and centers on this team. You got Kuzma, you got Sadiq Bey, who can kind of play the 3 or the 4. We're going to see how he's doing post-injury. And then you got the Patrick Baldwin and Anthony Gale, who, again, I'm not really sure what to do with these guys. If you ended up moving a Kyle Kuzma or something like that, I could see Sadiq Bey, if he's playing okay, coming in at the starting 4. I think that'd be good. You could probably also throw Marvin Bagley there. It's not going to be the most cohesive thing ever, but I think it's possible just because you'd have 2 really mobile big men on the court. I don't know. You could get some interesting things out of that. But at the center position, yeah, you do have Sarr, Valanciunas, Bagley. Rashawn Holmes can play NBA minutes if you need him to. So it could be a trade piece in here somewhere that I think could be kind of interesting. Maybe it's just Rashawn Holmes in some capacity because a team needs help getting off a salary or something like that. That could be a great use of him, right? Because he's making a decent amount of money. You don't have to pay him after this season. So you could take on a bad contract or something like that somebody doesn't want. They'll give you some picks for it, and that's a good way to acquire some wealth, right? Just the thought of mine. But anyway, let's go do some trades. Let's simulate a trade or two. I haven't thought of them yet, so I have to think of them off camera as to what I want to do with this team. I've got an idea for who I want to trade. I just don't know what it's going to be. And we'll just kind of simulate some ideas and see what you guys think. Wait, before we even do that, I am totally missing somebody. Who the hell? What? How did this happen? Corey Kispert's on this team. So one of these 3 is getting cut. Corey Kispert comes in somewhere, probably here, right? How did I miss Corey Kispert? Let's talk about Corey Kispert really quick. Look, I make mistakes. I'm not the brightest person in the world. It happens, okay? Corey Kispert, nice basketball player, right? 3-point shooting specialist, has developed okay for them. Hasn't really turned into anything much more than what he was when he came in, but that's okay. Defensive numbers are pretty bleh at the moment, but you get a guy that can at least shoot the basketball, right? You go over to Corey Kispert here, 6 attempts a game, 38, 39%, 13 points a game. You take that out of the wing, right? So I completely forgot about Corey Kispert. Totally my fault. Totally my fault. I'll fix everything else in the video. I'll fix the rotations and everything like that. But yeah, no, we'll get back into trade proposals and everything. Alrighty, so we're here on Fanspo. I've thought of a couple things that I might want to do with the Wizards. So let's try to execute on these trades. The first one I'm going to explore is a Kyle Kuzma trade, just because I think that's the most exciting way to start off the video. And I was kind of thinking like, okay, who would go for Kyle Kuzma? I feel like the Miami Heat would. I feel like he's the type of guy that they could use on this team, slide in at the power forward. It's a position that's a little bit open for them right now, and I think there's an obvious way to get it done. So Kyle Kuzma going over to the Heat. They'd throw in Duncan Robinson's salary just because they don't necessarily need his salary. They can better utilize it elsewhere. Who else are they going to throw in? Like a Josh Richardson? That gets us pretty close to the money then. They don't necessarily need Josh Richardson. The Wizards could cut somebody else afterwards. What kind of picks are we working with here? They have a 2028, 2029. You got to give us like that 2029 pick. They've talked about trading it or whatever. Give us this like 2026 second as well. I'd say something like that. Could be pretty good. This should work. This fails. He can only take back, cut another 1 million. Oh, screw off. All right, so we can't do Josh Richardson. We need somebody a little bit more than that, right? It could be Kevin Love. It could be Haywood Highsmith. Like, okay, so let's just say that we're not doing him. They probably don't want to trade Kevin Love necessarily unless they want to buy him out. They could just do that, honestly, and then he gets bought out and does something else. They have to cut 266. Okay, never mind. It has to be like Haywood Highsmith then. So undo the trade. Haywood Highsmith it is. He goes over to the Wizards. They get somebody interesting. They get a much better player in Kyle Kuzma. Yeah, Haywood Highsmith was recently traded or whatever, and he can't be. So it happens later in the season. Not a big deal. This is an interesting first move. Heat get a player that they need, a guy that can go get them some more buckets and stuff like that, improves their starting lineup. Wizards take back a couple of contracts that aren't that great and some picks. This is what I was talking about, using some of these assets, gain more draft capital. Awesome. Let's do another one. Next one here, the Lakers finally get a trade that works out, right? Like I said, somebody's going to want Valanciunas at some point, and I feel like the Lakers could be it. There just so happens to be a guy with a very similar contract that isn't very desirable to the Lakers right now in Gabe Vincent that you can send over. And then what are we going to do, right? Now we're acquiring more draft picks again. Give us this 2029, like, first round pick, like top 8 protected, or maybe just like top 10 protected, something like that. That goes over here. Throw us like this second round picks that we have one for this upcoming draft or whatever, maybe another one. That could be enough. Valanciunas isn't going to be like that crazy for this season, but we get something like that kind of going here. This trade should work in theory. Cool. This is a good way for them to take on a contract that's not that good, not that valuable right now, but use a player in Valanciunas to go get something else because they have other centers that they can go to. Maybe his veteran leadership is that valuable and you want to keep him, but that's not for me to evaluate. That's for the coaches to evaluate. So that's an interesting option. Let's go do one more that I have the idea for. All right, I just think this one would be fun. What if, just what if we could pull off a Jordan Poole trade and send him back to the Warriors? This would almost never happen, but if we could do something like this and like a Moses Moody, like that just works, doesn't it? That just works. Interesting, right? Maybe they just really think Jordan Poole will be good again when he gets back on the Warriors. Could very well see it. I don't know. Just kind of wanted to throw it out there. Let's go talk about rotations and everything. And I'm sorry if I see any Corey Kispert comments because I forgot to list him. I don't know. I'll probably just be like, yeah, that's my bad in the comments. But let's go talk about rotations. Alrighty, so here we go with the rotation screen. I always put a question mark on it because I don't know what they're actually going to do at the end of the year. I just think this is a good activity for coaches to do, to be like, okay, where do we want to kind of keep guys this season? Where do we really want to be playing them? So in this exercise, we've got our starters, right? We got Brogdon getting around 29 minutes. I think you're probably going to want to play him a decent amount of time for the most part, just because having that stable point guard presence is going to prevent you from at least being this season. At least you hope so, right? Tyus Jones was solid enough. I think Brogdon's a step up from that, but I think that's going to be a good one. Jordan Poole and Kyle Kuzma getting the most minutes on the team. They're the best two players on the team. We got to hope that they can right their ships a little bit and just be somewhat more effective, right? They just have to be. They're the best two guys on the team. We got to do that. I want to give Koulibaly a ton of minutes. Let's see what we can get out of this dude. We don't have a lot of people in interesting like situations yet. We're like, okay, let's see where he can go. This guy's got an opportunity. There's not a lot of competition at his position right now, so let's see where he can go. And then Alex Sarr is the starting center, but you'll see I have him split with Valanciunas right now. Just have him split the minutes. Don't have Sarr have a ton of pressure on him in his first year, right? I mean, that's the benefit of having Valanciunas. You don't have to do that. So just have him split the minutes this year. I think that's totally fine. That's still a lot of minutes for a first-round pick this year, enough for him to get his feet wet and everything, come back bigger and stronger the second season, and hopefully improve, take on a little bit more. Bub Carrington's also going to get quite a few minutes just because you went and traded Denny to go get him. There's nobody else that we're really that interested in developing like after this until you get down to like George and stuff. But again, he's a little bit more long-term of a project. So let's see what we got in Bub Carrington this year. Roll him out there with the second unit. Let him be a facilitator. He's going to have some other guys around him that can do some things. So let's see what we got. I got Corey Kispert on there. He's a nice basketball player. He gets his 20 minutes. All right. We're all good with that. I think we're all good with that. Marvin Bagley gets some burn here or there just because. Try to keep his trade value up. Sadiq Bey, let's give him a shot. See what he's got this year. See if he's feeling a little bit better. And he could very well work himself up higher in this rotation. I wouldn't be surprised if he did. If he's healthy, he totally could. And then you got the Johnny Davis, Keyshawn George, Butler, Rashawn Holmes, Patrick Baldwin, Anthony Gill. I just didn't even include on here because somebody's going to have to go from this roster anyway. But that's what we're seeing here. Let's go look at their actual rotations from last year and see kind of like what was working and what mostly wasn't working. So here's the Wizards 5-man rotations from last year, and it looks like there were two lineups in particular that were used a lot, and both of them were negative. This wasn't a very good team, so that doesn't surprise me. There wasn't a ton of positives. At least there weren't some with many minutes. This one had, it's not a good sample size at all, but it's something. You had Jordan Poole playing point guard, so this is kind of an end-of-the-season roster, most likely, playing with Corey Kispert, a shooter, Denny, who was playing really good basketball at this point. You'll notice Denny was in like all the top lineups right here, so there was a little bit of causation there at the very least, right? I mean, he's in a lot of the bad ones too, but I mean, there's just only so many good ones. So Denny's gone now. That's unfortunate. But let's go back to this one. Jordan Poole. Then you had Kuzma with Rashawn Holmes. That's really interesting, actually. But they had a pretty weak center game last year, so there's just not much that could be done because they traded Daniel Gafford at one point during the season, which I think they had to do. I think that was a good idea for them to do. There wasn't a point in keeping him, and they got some assets for it. So good move, all said and done. What about these lineups that weren't working? So this is Tyus Jones, Poole, Denny, Kuzma, Gafford. This was just their starting five for most of the season. The team was just ass. It wasn't very good. It's just what it was. And then we've got a Tyus Jones, Jordan Poole with Koulibaly, Kuzma, and Gafford. So again, just more of a refined starting lineup that just kind of got cooked more often than not. So there's really not much to say out of this outside of just like the team wasn't that good last year. I mean, if we look at their top lineup here, it was just kind of a nonsense one that was thrown out there for points last season. So it is what it is. We can get a lot more insight though from this three-man combination. You'll see there's no real positive ones. The ones with Poole, Denny, and Kispert are at the top. Poole, Denny, Gafford. Again, all the top ones had Denny with it, man. So and Gafford, that doesn't surprise me, but it's like you don't necessarily see Kuzma at the top of like a lot of these lists and stuff like that. So I don't know. There's a big part of me that says like, yeah, you just kind of don't need these guys at the end of the day. And I don't get why they traded Denny. He was like one of the few things that was starting to work for them, right? At least it was starting to work. So not a lot we can tell from this necessarily, at least when we go back to like our rotation here. What does that tell us? We hope that Brogdon can be more effective than like Tyus Jones was last year. Maybe throwing Koulibaly into the starting lineup is going to be better. Hopefully just having a better defensive presence and Alex Sarr helps out the starting lineup, but hard to say at the end of the day. Hard to say. All right, let's get into predictions. Alrighty, we got to zoom out to see this one. The Wizards all the way at the bottom. Let's do an East recap. What do we got right now with the rest of the East? We got the Celtics and Knicks at the top, Sixers somewhere in the middle, Heat just squeaking in towards the top of the play-in. Hawks unfortunately fell back into the 10 spot. Sorry, Hawks fans. Bulls, Pistons, Nets kind of looking in the outside. I know a lot of us are expecting the Wizards to be up here. Drum roll, please. Let's click this damn button. The Wizards are the 14th seed. They're not going to be good this year. This team is not going to it's not going to be good. I'm choking with how much I wanted to maybe say they'd be better, but this basketball team is not going to be very good this year. This basketball team wasn't good last year. Like it's not going to be much better this year. I have doubts that the Wizards organization is cleaned up and that it's going to be better. I want it so bad for you Wizards fans. I really, really do. I want the team to be good. I've got connections here. Like I said, I want those people to be happy and do well. I really, really do. It's just, man, I don't know. I don't. Who else would they be better than? Like I do think the Pistons are going to be better than them. I think the Bulls are going to be better than them. I don't know, y'all. I hope that they can get a good draft pick this next year and they can go in and maybe they get a Cooper Flag or something like that. I mean, there's a couple guys in this next draft that could change a franchise, like if developed correctly. So I just feel bad for whoever gets picked by this team. Like it just doesn't work, right? It hasn't worked. I hope they clean it up. I really hope they do. Wizards fans, I'm looking out for you out there. I turn it over to you guys now. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comments down below. As always, keep it chill in the comments. Like, don't be like spattering at people. And we've been really good at that recently. And, you know, the channel's just been down in views because it's kind of the off season. The only people watching right now are sweats anyway. But thank you guys for keeping it civil and being educational in the comments. As always, that's what we want to do. We want to share opinions. It's the only way to grow, y'all. It's the only way to grow and become a better person. But hey, I'll be bringing you guys these videos every weekday until the start of the season. I'm excited to do so, but until then, make sure you guys like, subscribe, and comment, and we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks so much. Bye.